He tried to defend himself, but the truth is, from the second he opened his mouth, you could feel it. This wasn't confidence, it was panic wearing a suit. The man thought he could talk his way out, like words could rewrite what everyone already saw. But in that room, every single word he spoke was digging his own silence. And here's the wild part, he didn't even realize it. From the jump, he leaned back like he owned the place. Same old courtroom swagger. You know that look. Chin up, shoulders stiff, trying to play it cool while the walls are closing in. Reporters scribbling notes, cameras clicking, his team giving that fake "you got this" nod. But if you were really watching, you saw it. The eyes. That split-second flicker when he realized Jasmine Crockett wasn't just sitting there to listen. She was studying him. Every pause, every phrase, every little defensive twitch. Man thought he was untouchable. Like, I've been in this seat for decades. Who's gonna check me? He really believed the same old playbook would save him again. Talk big, sound smart, throw a few buzzwords in, and let the moment pass. But this time, the room didn't move with him. It shifted against him. And that's the thing nobody tells you about power. It doesn't fade, it flips. 1 second the spotlight's your protection, and the next, it's a mirror you can't hide from. As he started defending himself, his voice got louder, but his control got smaller. The harder he tried to sound confident, the more cracks started showing. Crockett didn't interrupt, not once. She just sat there, hands folded, eyes steady. That silence, that was the real problem. Because silence in a courtroom isn't empty. It's pressure. It's truth waiting for its turn. He kept talking about experience, about precedent, about how people misunderstood his intent. You could almost hear his advisors whispering the script in their heads, but every sentence had that same undertone, desperation, like he was arguing more with himself than anyone else in the room. The crowd wasn't buying it. You could see people exchanging looks. One woman in the back raised her brow, another shook her head like, no way he's saying this out loud. Even the stenographer had to pause once, because nobody expected the defense to sound that weak. And Crockett? Still silent. Not a flinch, not a blink. She was letting him fill the space, letting him trap himself word by word. Because when someone's drowning, you don't pull them out. You just stop throwing them excuses. Then it happened. That one line he shouldn't have said. That one sentence where his tone cracked just enough for the room to hear the fear behind the formality. You know that type of sound, when someone's trying to be logical, but their voice starts trembling because deep down, they know they've already lost. You could feel the energy shift. The air got heavier. The supporters who were nodding moments ago stopped moving. Some looked down at their phones, pretending to check something just to avoid eye contact. And Jasmine slowly leaned forward. That tiny movement was louder than anything he'd said in 10 minutes. The sound in the room? Gone. No coughs, no papers, no clicks. Just her eyes locked on his, steady as a judge and sharp as a verdict. The camera angle caught it perfectly. His lips still moving, but the meaning gone. It wasn't an argument anymore. It was a man trying to outrun the silence. And right there, you realized he wasn't defending himself. He was delaying the inevitable. The reporters could feel it too. One leaned toward another and whispered, "She's about to end him." Another shook his head, eyes wide. "She's not even talking yet." And that's when it hit. The fear, the tension, the anticipation, all of it building to a single point. Everyone in that courtroom knew something was coming. Not a debate, not a rebuttal, a moment. Because you could tell by her face, Crockett already had the question ready. Not a long speech, not a lecture, just one question that would cut straight through everything he just said. And that's the thing about moments like this. You don't see them twice. You don't get a replay. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about truth colliding with ego, live, raw, unfiltered. The kind of moment that people rewatch again and again because they still can't believe it was that quiet, that fast, that final. And as he took that last breath before she spoke, even the microphone seemed to know what was about to happen. The signal flickered, the camera zoomed in, and then nothing. Because what she said next, that one question, it didn't just silence a courtroom, it froze history for a second. So if you think this was about words, wait till you hear what came after them. He thought the worst was over. He really did. But nah, this was the part nobody prepared him for. Because what came next wasn't a shout, it wasn't a meltdown, it wasn't some over-the-top courtroom rant. It was one question, just one. And it hit harder than anything that had been said all morning. The second Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, the air changed. You know that vibe when a room goes from noise to stillness and everybody feels it in their gut? That's what happened right there. People stopped scrolling on their phones, the reporters stopped typing, even the guards standing in the back straightened up a little. It was that kind of silence, the something's about to happen kind. She didn't raise her voice, didn't throw shade, didn't even change her expression. She just asked, calm, sharp, surgical. A question so simple that you could almost miss it, until you realized what it actually meant. And man, the look on his face said it all. You could literally see the calculation happen behind his eyes, like he was trying to figure out which version of the truth might save him fastest, and realizing none of them would. This wasn't some random gotcha moment, it was a precision strike. A question built on facts, pulled straight from his own words, his own record, his own contradictions. She wasn't attacking, she was exposing. And that's the part that hurts more than any insult ever could, when someone uses your own logic to corner you. She didn't need drama, she brought receipts. Every single line of that question came from something he'd already said, somewhere he'd already stood. And that's why it landed so deep. Because it wasn't about what she claimed, it was about what he couldn't deny. For a second, you could see him about to answer. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he knew exactly what to say, and couldn't say it without proving her right. That's the checkmate nobody sees coming. The crowd shifted. You could hear one person whisper, "Oh my God," another one mutter, "He's done." Reporters glanced at each other like, did she just do that? And then they realized, yes, she did. You ever see someone try to find a way out, but every exit's locked? That was him. Eyes darting, throat tightening, trying to reset, trying to find control again. But the more he tried, the deeper he sank. Because that question didn't just expose his argument, it exposed the whole act. The man who came in confident, the man who thought he could spin it, suddenly looked smaller. Not physically, but presence-wise. His whole aura just deflated. That's what happens when truth walks in the room. It doesn't need a megaphone. It just stands there and lets everyone else realize what's real. Crockett didn't move, didn't press, didn't follow up, didn't smirk. She just watched him, try to fill the silence she left behind. And that silence, it was louder than any speech. You could literally feel it. Every second that ticked by made it worse for him. It was like time stretched. Every little sound in the room became clearer. The clock ticking, the papers shifting, someone in the gallery clearing their throat. Every bit of noise just made the silence heavier. And the best part? She knew exactly what she'd done. The calm in her expression wasn't arrogance, it was precision. Like a surgeon who knows the work is already complete before the patient even realizes it. She'd said her piece, and the rest was just gravity doing its job. The clip would later be replayed millions of times, but in that moment, nobody knew they were watching history. They just knew something rare had happened. Someone had cut through all the noise and said the one thing that couldn't be dodged. He tried to recover, cleared his throat, adjusted his tie, gave a forced smile like he still had control. But it was gone. The authority, the dominance, the illusion, all gone. That one question stripped it all away, and everyone in that courtroom saw it. And that's what makes moments like this so dangerous for powerful people. It's not the volume that breaks them, it's the accuracy. A single question that exposes what speeches and headlines never could. Because that's the American courtroom for you. 1 minute, it's politics. The next, it's history. And the difference? Usually just one sentence. You could almost hear the collective breath people were holding. Every camera zoomed in closer, waiting for his response that never came. You could see his lips press together, his jaw tighten, his eyes dart toward his attorney like maybe he could borrow an answer, but there wasn't one. It was over before anyone even said it was, and still, the sound of nothing kept echoing. You ever been in a room so quiet it's uncomfortable? Multiply that by 10, because this wasn't silence from respect, it was silence from shock. And that's the real story here, not just what she asked, but what happened after she asked it. Because when that video hit the internet, when America saw what silence looks like in real time, that's when it stopped being a courtroom moment. It became a statement. And trust me, silence like that, it speaks. So if you think this was over, just wait till you see what happened when that clip went public. You ever seen a man lose an argument without saying a single word? Yeah, that was this moment. No shouting, no fireworks, no last-minute spin, just silence. Pure, heavy, suffocating silence. The kind that crawls into the walls and stays there. The second Jasmine Crockett finished her question, the whole room froze, like time just stopped. You could literally hear the cameras clicking. Reporters looked up from their notes. Even the ones who came in ready to defend him were like, wait, did that just happen? It wasn't dramatic in the Hollywood sense. It was real-life tension. The kind where every eye in the room starts searching for someone, anyone, to break the silence. But nobody did. Not even him. He sat there, the longest-serving justice in the country, the guy who'd spent decades teaching everyone else about the Constitution. And for the first time, he looked like he wanted to disappear behind his own stack of papers. You know how courtroom mics usually catch everything, even the quiet breaths? Not this time. It's like the mics themselves didn't want to interrupt that silence. Crockett just sat there, calm, composed, almost too still. She didn't need to add anything. The question was doing all the work for her. And the silence? That was the answer. You could feel the energy flip. Before this, he controlled the tone. Every sentence felt rehearsed, sharp, practiced. But now, the power had shifted completely. It wasn't his courtroom anymore. It was hers. Some people in the back tried to pretend nothing happened. You could see one of his aides whispering something, probably like, "Just respond, sir." But it was too late. The silence had already gone viral, even before anyone uploaded a clip. And you know what's crazy? It wasn't just quiet. It was loud. Loud with realization. Loud with disbelief. Loud with the sound of an entire narrative collapsing in front of millions of people who'd been told to trust it. Reporters started typing again, but you could see them struggling. Like, how do you even describe what just happened? Justice Thomas speechless? That headline writes itself, and they knew it. Someone in the gallery muttered, "Oh my God," and another just whispered, "She did it." Even the gavel didn't sound like it had authority anymore when Chairman Johnson tried to bring the room back. Because you can't gavel away a moment like that. You can't call order on truth. The camera zoomed in, her eyes locked straight ahead, his blinking, shoulders tight. That single frame would later become the photo, the one every news outlet used, the one every meme page turned into a statement. The look of silence catching up with power. And man, online, forget about it. Within minutes, people were clipping that pause, looping it, captioning it. The moment truth hit. Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, went crazy. Did that just happen? He really had no answer. She cornered him with his own words. Hashtags everywhere. Hashtag Crockett question, hashtag good behavior clause, hashtag judicial accountability. It wasn't just a debate anymore. It was history unfolding live. Even news anchors couldn't hide their reactions. You had anchors literally going off script, saying, "This is one of those moments we'll replay for years." You could see the shift in their tone, respectful, stunned, maybe even a little inspired. And back in that courtroom, he still hadn't said anything meaningful. Every word he tried to form just hung there, unfinished. Because once the silence hits like that, any comeback sounds like noise. Crockett knew it. She didn't chase it, didn't try to go viral. She just gathered her papers like her job was done. Because it was. That's what separates real debaters from loud ones. She knew the silence was the win. You could almost see it in her body language, a quiet victory. No celebration, no smirk, just that slow exhale of someone who knows they've shifted the room in ways that can't be undone.
Even as the chairman called for recess, the vibe didn't reset. The silence followed people out the door. Journalists didn't talk, they texted. Lawyers whispered. Spectators looked at each other like they just watched something historic but didn't know how to describe it yet. Outside, the world was already reacting. News sites crashed from traffic. Comment sections flooded. One clip hit 500,000 views in an hour. And everywhere, the same reaction. How did he not see that coming? Because that's the beauty of it. He didn't. He was so sure he had the upper hand that he never thought silence could be his undoing. And that's what makes this moment timeless. It's not about politics anymore. It's about what happens when truth meets ego, when calm meets arrogance, when one question outlasts a lifetime of talking. People talk about mic drop moments. Nah, this wasn't that. This was quieter, heavier, realer. She didn't drop the mic, she made the mic irrelevant. And the silence? It didn't end when the recess started. It kept echoing. Through the corridors, through the press rooms, through the feeds, through every American watching, realizing that maybe, just maybe, the system wasn't as untouchable as it looked. It's wild how a few seconds of silence can say what decades of debate never did. But that's exactly what happened. Because that silence, it wasn't empty. It was full of meaning, full of consequence, full of everything he didn't or couldn't say. And outside that courtroom, that silence turned into something way louder. Because once the country saw that clip, the question, the pause, the look, it stopped being about one man and one woman. It became accountability, about what good behavior really means, about who gets to question power and who doesn't. And that's the part that changed everything. So yeah, he lost that argument without saying a single word. But what came after? Oh, that's when the real noise began.
You know when the internet catches fire? Not over a meme, not over a scandal, but over a single moment that just feels different? Yeah, that was this. The clip hit Twitter at 9:02 a.m. By 9:05, it wasn't just trending, it was erupting. Hashtags, hot takes, reaction videos, you name it. America wasn't watching the news anymore, America was the news. At first, it was just a short 42-second clip. No fancy edits, just raw courtroom footage. Jasmine Crockett asking one question that left a justice staring like his brain just blue-screened. Somebody posted it with the caption, "This ain't a question, it's a verdict." Boom. That line stuck. It became the internet's new rallying cry. Within minutes, the video started bouncing between platforms like wildfire. YouTube commentators jumped on it, TikTok creators remixed it, and by the time CNN caught up, it was already on every top 10 moments you missed this morning list. The silence from that courtroom had officially turned into the loudest sound online. You know how it goes. One person tweets, "She cooked." Another says, "He's done." Then boom, thousands of retweets, 1 million views, and suddenly you've got every political commentator in the country trying to break down how a single question could dismantle decades of reputation. And the best part? Crockett wasn't even trying to go viral. She wasn't grandstanding, no smirk, no gotcha face, just that calm, steady look, like someone who didn't come to argue, came to expose. And that's exactly what people felt. Comments poured in. This is how you question power. That's not attitude, that's intellect. She didn't shout, she educated. The praise was wild, but the deeper it spread, the more it shifted from entertainment to revelation. Because everyone watching could feel it. This wasn't politics as usual. This was accountability in real time. Every news outlet started playing the clip on loop. MSNBC called it a legal masterclass in composure. The View debated it live. Fox tried to downplay it, but couldn't ignore the views. Even independent creators who usually stayed neutral were like, yo, this was different. And the memes? Oh, the memes were ruthless. Split screens of her asking the question while he froze, people adding captions like, "Windows error 404, defense not found." That image became the thumbnail of the week, the stare, the silence, the impact. But here's where it got interesting, because the more the clip spread, the more uncomfortable certain people got. Some conservative pundits tried to twist it, saying she was disrespectful or grandstanding for clicks, but that only backfired. The receipts didn't lie. The footage spoke for itself.
And that's when the narrative split. On one side, millions cheering her for speaking truth to power. On the other, those scrambling to defend a man who, for the first time, had no defense. The tension was electric. It wasn't just trending, it was dividing. But through all of it, Crockett never broke character. No statements, no interviews, no "I told you so," just silence. Again. And that silence only made her look stronger. Meanwhile, analysts started breaking it down frame by frame. You had law professors calling it constitutional precision. You had Gen Z creators saying, this is why representation matters. Everyone saw something in it. Intellect, courage, control. At 10 a.m., a reaction video by a political YouTuber hit 1 million views. At 10:30, celebrities started tweeting. By lunchtime, every cable channel was running with the headline, "Crockett's question stuns judiciary." You could almost feel the shift from viral clip to cultural moment, because for once, it wasn't outrage that went viral, it was truth. And here's the thing, America loves a clapback, but this wasn't shade. This was constitutional poetry. A question so sharp it cut through decades of privilege, ego, and pretense. She didn't embarrass him, she educated the entire country, live on camera. But you know what always happens when someone powerful gets exposed? The pushback. The machine doesn't stay quiet for long, and by mid-afternoon, you could feel it brewing. The talking points, the spin, the "what she really meant was" crowd gearing up to rewrite the story. Still, the internet wasn't having it. People had already seen the clip, raw and unedited. They'd seen the pause, the look, the shift. You can't fact-check silence. You can't spin what everyone already witnessed. And that's what scared them. Because this wasn't just about one courtroom exchange, it was about the bigger picture. Who gets to question power, and who gets punished for it? By 3 p.m., the clip had over 10 million views. Newsrooms were scrambling. Campaign spokespeople were ducking questions. Commentators were arguing about tone, while the public was laser-focused on truth. One journalist summed it up perfectly. She didn't raise her voice once, and somehow she said everything America's been waiting to hear. That's when you realize it wasn't the question that went viral, it was the feeling behind it. The frustration, the boldness, the refusal to play along with the script. It hit something deeper, something raw. But just as the moment reached its peak, that's when things took a turn. A single reaction flipped the narrative, a statement from someone no one expected. And just like that, the internet's favorite moment suddenly had a dark cloud over it. Because in America, every truth that shines too bright eventually draws its shadows. And that's where the next chapter begins, the backlash. You ever notice how the louder the truth hits, the faster the backlash comes? Yeah, every action gets a reaction, and this one hit like a shockwave. The moment that courtroom clip went viral, you could feel the system shake a little. And it wasn't just about the question anymore. It was about what that question uncovered. At first, everyone was laughing, cheering, sharing. But then, the tone changed. Overnight, the debate flipped. Suddenly, commentators who were quiet before started popping up on screens saying things like, "She went too far," or "that was disrespectful." You could tell it wasn't about the content anymore, it was about control. Fox News ran a panel titled, "Was Crockett out of line?" Like that was the real issue. Pundits started framing it as an emotional outburst, even though she hadn't raised her voice once. The irony was wild. A woman speaks calmly, asks a pointed question, and somehow she's the one who's too much? That's when you knew this wasn't just backlash. It was protection. Protection for someone who wasn't used to being held accountable in public. Meanwhile, her supporters doubled down. Hashtags flipped from #CrockettQuestion to #CrockettCourage. TikTok was filled with lawyers breaking down her exact phrasing, every pause, every word, explaining how it wasn't opinion, it was law. And on Twitter, the comments hit harder than any headline. They're not mad because she was wrong, they're mad because she was right. But man, the pushback came fast. Political analysts started digging into her history, trying to discredit her. The classic move. Old interviews resurfaced, out-of-context quotes spread. You could practically hear the PR teams working overtime. Every network had someone ready to balance the narrative. The message was clear: if you can't refute the truth, smear the messenger. Still, Crockett didn't flinch, not once. No press tours, no apologies, no clapbacks. Just silence. The same silence that made her question hit harder in the first place. It's like she understood. In a country where outrage feeds the algorithm, the real power is in not giving them what they expect. And that silence, it messed with them. You could see it. Reporters kept saying she declined to comment. Commentators got frustrated. Why isn't she responding? Because that's what power looks like when it doesn't need validation.
Then the breakdown began. Not hers, but theirs. The side defending him started fracturing. You had one host saying she disrespected the office, while another muttered, but technically she wasn't wrong. The cracks started to show. It was like watching a fortress crumble from the inside. On social media, you'd scroll past clips of her courtroom moment right next to compilation videos of politicians dodging questions. People were connecting dots. They weren't just entertained, they were awake. The narrative they tried to spin just wasn't landing anymore. And here's what made it emotional. People weren't just reacting to her question, they were reacting to what it symbolized. For every woman who'd been talked over in a meeting, for every young lawyer who'd been told to wait your turn, for every person who'd ever been told to respect authority when authority was wrong. It wasn't just politics, it was personal. Then came the think pieces. Is this the end of civility? Have we lost respect in our institutions? Funny, right? Because civility didn't seem to matter when the tables were turned. That's the American paradox. We praise courage until it makes us uncomfortable. But even as the outrage machine ran full speed, the truth never lost traction. People were replaying the clip like gospel. The same courtroom silence that started it all was still echoing through phones, podcasts, TV screens. Every replay reminded viewers, this is what accountability looks like. And yet, behind all that noise, you could feel something shifting. He stopped doing interviews. His team went radio silent. And when a reporter finally asked him about that moment, he just muttered, it was taken out of context. You could tell he hadn't recovered. Not from her question, not from the silence that followed. By now, the backlash had reached its peak. Every network had had their say, every opinion piece had been written. But one thing never changed: the clip, the question, the moment. The world saw it, felt it, remembered it. And no amount of spin could erase what everyone had already witnessed. Crockett's expression in those final frames became symbolic, calm, grounded, almost sorrowful, like someone who didn't need to win the argument to make her point. She never raised her voice, and somehow that was the loudest part. But just when everyone thought the dust was settling, something new began to surface. A follow-up no one expected. Reports, statements, reactions from behind the scenes. Because after every backlash, there's always an aftershock. And what came next would prove one thing: silence isn't weakness. It's the setup before the next strike. You ever seen silence go viral? Not a speech, not a shout, not even a word. Just pure, still silence that hits harder than any debate could. When the shouting stopped, that silence became the headline. It wasn't the courtroom that went quiet that day. It was the country. Because for once, America wasn't arguing. It was listening. By now, everyone had seen the clip. Every news anchor had played it. Every commentator had picked it apart. And every social feed had been flooded with that one frozen frame. Him, speechless. Her, steady. He tried to defend himself, sure. But in the end, it wasn't her words that ended it. It was his silence. And that silence, man, it echoed far beyond those courtroom walls. The media called it the question heard round the nation. Late-night shows made jokes about it, TikTok stitched her line like it was scripture. And Twitter, X, turned into a battlefield of takes and hashtags. Some called it justice, some called it disrespect. But no matter what side you were on, you couldn't deny what you saw. You couldn't deny what you felt. Because it wasn't about politics anymore. It was about truth, the kind that doesn't need a mic to be heard. As the days passed, reporters tried to chase her down. Cameras followed her to the Capitol steps, mics in her face. "Congresswoman, do you regret your words? Do you think you went too far?" But she didn't say a thing. Just that same calm expression, eyes forward, walking past the chaos like she'd already said everything she needed to. That clip, her walking away while the world shouted around her, that became the closing shot every network used. The moment the argument officially ended. Behind the scenes, you could feel the tension shift. Staffers whispered about how he hasn't been the same since. Press teams scrambled to repair the image, to spin the story, to pull focus somewhere else. But the public wasn't buying it. Because deep down, people know authenticity when they see it. They know when someone's cornered by truth. You'd scroll through your feed, and every comment had the same energy. She didn't just end a debate, she exposed a culture. That's what made it powerful. It wasn't about one courtroom clash. It was about an entire system being forced to look in the mirror, even for a second. The memes kept rolling in, but something deeper started forming too. Op-eds, podcasts, think pieces titled "The Power of Stillness in an Age of Noise" and "When Women Don't Have to Shout to Be Heard." Professors were showing the clip in law schools. Activists were quoting her line at rallies. It wasn't just trending anymore. It had transformed into a message. And it's wild, right? Because in a country where every second feels like a shouting match, every headline, every hearing, every feed refresh, somehow the thing that broke through all that noise was a moment of silence. She didn't need to slam her hand on the desk or talk over anyone. She didn't need to win in the traditional sense. She simply let the truth sit there long enough for everyone to see it. And that's what made it haunting. Because when truth lands, you don't need to repeat it. You just let the silence do the work. Even the late-night hosts, who usually make everything a punchline, had a tone shift when they talked about her. One said, that wasn't a clapback. That was a mic drop wrapped in the Constitution. Another added, she didn't just silence him. She reminded the room what accountability actually sounds like. By the end of the week, the narrative had flipped completely. What started as a viral moment had become a lesson, not just for politicians, but for the public. People realized the difference between making noise and making impact. And she stayed quiet through it all. No interviews, no statements, just grace. Just proof that sometimes dignity is the loudest answer. And yet, even in that quiet, the story didn't fade. The clip kept circulating. Students were editing it into class presentations. Analysts were using it in debate training. It became this unspoken symbol of how poise can outmatch power and silence can outshine arrogance. A week later, he finally spoke again. A prepared statement, polished, predictable. But by then, no one cared. The moment had passed him by. Because when you lose the room, when you lose the people, no statement can bring that back. And that's exactly what happened. She didn't destroy him with insults or theatrics. She didn't have to. She dismantled her with calm. And that calm, that still, unshakable silence, became something bigger than both of them. It became a reminder that maybe in a country built on debate, the strongest voice isn't always the loudest one. Maybe real strength is knowing when to stop talking, when to let truth breathe. Because once truth is out there, once it's been heard, you don't have to fight for it. It fights for itself. As the music fades and the camera pans out, you see her stepping into the hallway, flashbulbs going off, questions flying, and her just walking, head high, no words. That's the moment that sealed it. The silence wasn't the end of the story. It was the story. And in that final frame, as her figure disappears through the courthouse doors,
The narration lands. Slow, heavy, certain. In a country built on debate, sometimes the strongest voice is the one that doesn't have to speak again.